My wife and I made a mistake. We listened to Dave Ramsey.
You're not smart.
We got the shortest possible term on our mortgage that we could. We put 20% down. We followed all the rules. But now in hindsight, I've realized it's not worth it. Here's the regrets that I have as far as our 10-year mortgage go. Number one, we've spent more money on our mortgage payment than we needed to, and that excess money could have been invested. We bought this house in 2016, and we've had around a $1,500 mortgage payment the whole time. Now, at the time, we could have gotten something like a 30-year mortgage with something like an $800 or $900 payment, and that would have been totally average, totally normal. In the meantime, we could have had $500 or $600 a month more that we could have been investing. Now, it's nice to have equity in the house. It's nice to pay it on the loan. All that's fine and dandy, but we would have made more money over the last 7 years had we invested that money instead of slowly paying off a 2-point-something% interest rate. Silly. Regret number two. We spent a bunch of that money paying down an objectively low interest rate. Now, granted, none of us has a crystal ball. We can't see what's going on in the future. We don't know if interest rates are going to go to zero tomorrow and our 2% interest rate is really high. Who knows? But historically, in the history of the world of mortgages, 2% is about as low as they go. And so we could have taken some contextual clues to say, hey, maybe there's only really one way up from here, and that's up. I'm still not a big fan of debt, but maybe in those instances it would have made more sense to say, hey, if there's time to have debt, it's now. Let's go ahead and load up on it now as something that's sort of like an inflation hedge and wait for those interest rates to rise and go, hey, we've locked ourselves in, we're good, we have the lowest possible operating expenses now. Maybe that would have been wiser. Regret number three, I think about at least monthly, if not weekly, and that's that we could have afforded a bigger home that would have been nice to live in, and it would have appreciated more. So this house is like 1,700 square feet, which is honestly big enough, but at the time, we could have gotten a much bigger mortgage with a 30-year loan. We could have bought something that's close to twice this big, and it would have appreciated more, would have been in a nicer neighborhood, everything would have been nicer. Nope, we chose to listen to Dave.
You're not smart.
And now, regret number five, it's much harder to get into that larger home in the nicer neighborhood, despite the increase in this home's value, because the home prices here have risen along with the interest rates everywhere else. And so that larger, nicer home is now exponentially more expensive than it was back then. But not everything is terrible about having a short mortgage. I do have 4 things that I think are positives when it comes to having a 10 or a 15-year note on your house, so let's get into those now. Number one, over the course of our life, we'll have spent very little money on interest. We're talking about in the next 7 years having this place paid off and then never paying interest on maybe anything ever again. We don't hold a credit card balance. My wife's car is financed at 0%. Maybe this is the end of our interest payments. Could be really good. Positive number 2 is that in having such a short-term loan, we're paying it off sooner, which could mean that we have a paid-off house by the time I'm 45 years old. That would be really awesome. Think about what we could do with that freedom and that cash at that point. I like that. Positive number 3, we'll remain relatively safe and conservative in case there's some kind of bad financial situation that happens. Maybe it's external, maybe it's internal, like one of us can't work or something else happens. In that case, we've lowered our operating expenses so significantly that that blow would be a lot easier to take. I like that too. And number 4, we honestly made the best, most wise, responsible choice that we could at the time with the information we had. Hindsight is always able to poke holes in your plan, but did anyone have irrefutable evidence to prove that Arizona home values would double along with interest rates? No. We didn't know that moving up in house would be like crazy unaffordable after this. No one could predict that. Everyone had inklings, everyone had a little prediction, but they couldn't prove it. Plus, if I'm honest, I just didn't understand the concept of an inflation hedge. I didn't understand that mortgages are kind of in a cyclical high and low interest kind of like wavelength that comes and goes. We're in a time with slightly higher interest rates, but honestly, they've been a lot higher in the past. Like when I was a little kid, it was not uncommon for interest rates to be 8, 9, 10% on houses. Think about that. That would be crazy expensive. Plus, at the time in 2015 or 2016, I was not as aggressive as I am now. People change over time, and so I was really conservative, and I was concerned that if we overstretched ourselves, then we'd end up in this really stressful situation that, oh, we've bought too much house, now it's too much to afford, now it's going to be difficult for us to have a good relationship together because we're fighting about money. Like, I just wanted to take a conservative approach to all that, the financial and the relational side, and I thought this was the way to do it. Now I feel a little differently. I think in the end we can only make the decision with the information that we have at our fingertips available at the time and do what makes sense to us. because always optimizing every financial thing so perfectly just doesn't always work, and it can drive us a little crazy. Speaking of optimizing and driving people crazy, I want you to be able to manage your money in the way that makes sense to you, in a way that helps you long term, and in a way that costs you the least amount of money possible. And so I made an investing masterclass to teach you everything I know about investing in the most palatable, fun, interesting way. And that's linked in the description if you want to take it. Right now, the full price is $200. I want you to know that this resource is here. The course is about 4 hours long. And in an afternoon, you can go from being confused about how your money works and what happens when you invest and how to invest and how risk works, to then going, oh, I actually kind of know how this works now. I know how to invest my money. I know what I need to do to build wealth over time. I know how this thing works well enough that I can go out and do this. You don't necessarily need to go read 10 or 15 books and listen to 10 podcasts and spend years studying it like I did. You can just take one class and fast forward that. And that's really what classes are for, right? It's like a fast forward button on your life to where you don't have to go through all that pain anymore because someone else has synthesized it for you. If you've never taken an online class before, it might be kind of weird for you to think about. Think of it like 26 consecutive YouTube videos that all tie in together with this arc of introducing you to investing in money, explaining confusing things and how stuff works, and then getting into the actual tactics of what you should do and what makes sense as far as a long-term objective whenever you're investing, and answering common questions along the way. And so it's videos, but it's also more than that, because what I made was a guide for you to actually like fill in as you go. So you can print out a physical version of the guide that's linked in the class, and so you can fill it out by hand if you like, or there's also a digital version on Google Sheets. And so on your phone as you watch it or on your computer, you can fill in your own answers to the questions. And so what you're doing as you do that is you're taking notes that apply to you and your life and your preferences as you go. Hey, why do you want to be investing? What does this mean whenever we talk about that? And so what I find is whenever you have to put something in your own words, you remember it a lot better. And so it's almost like you having to go home and tell it to your spouse or tell it to your friend, like, oh, today I learned this thing. That like sticks better than if you just don't talk to anybody about it. And so I would challenge you, if you take the class, to go ahead and use that guide and fill it out, because it's going to make stuff stick. Plus you take it with you, and then now you have the answers to your own questions everywhere you go for the rest of your life. In all the online classes I've taken, including the one I'm taking right now that was a lot more expensive than mine, there's nothing like that. There's no like guide that you fill out as you go and you follow along and then you have to take with you as like this synthesis of that whole process. Everything's a lot more disjointed, or it just doesn't exist. And so I wanted that to be this special feature of my class that you have. Here's another personal finance related video for you to watch next that YouTube thinks would be great for you. And in the meantime, the secret comment word for today is regret. All right, see you next time. Bye.